I'm going to call to order the City of Burlington Board of Finance meeting for Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at 5:34 p.m. And on our agenda tonight is the beginning of our budget season. We'll be presenting individual departments of the City of Burlington's budget for upcoming fiscal year 26. And so tonight's meeting is structured like a Board of Finance meeting, so we'll go through our normal items. We do have other city councilors here and online, but Board of Finance members, I'll be looking to you to make motions and move us through the agenda. And we have all of the departments here for tonight, so we can go ahead and get started. So our first item is the agenda. Is there a motion on the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councilor Barlow. Is there a second? Councilor Carpenter, thank you. Is a second. Any discussion from the Board of Finance before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. On to our second item, which is public forum. It is the practice of the Board of Finance to first seek any comment from members of the public in the room, and then we will go online. Is anyone here in Contois Auditorium to speak to the Board of Finance? I know all those city employees. There's more city employees coming in. Okay. Seeing no one in the room, is anyone online interested in public comment? Please raise your hand on Zoom and we will recognize you. And our first member of the public is former City Councilor Sharon Busher. Good evening, Sharon. Welcome.
Good evening. Welcome back from vacation.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Anyways, so I'm going to make comments about both BED and the airport. It's been a while since I've reviewed information regarding the airport. This has nothing to do with their slide presentation, although there is one question. When they talk about the expansion at the airport, and they talk and reference that the only way this could have been done was with the federal funding. Are you there?
Yep, Sharon, hold on a second. We're having some audio. Hold on one second.
Sure.
It's someone on Zoom. All right, hold on, Sharon.
Yep.
Okay. Everyone is muted? Okay, so Sharon, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. I heard a voice in the background, so anyway.
So did we.
My concern was for that airport expansion. Oops. There's another voice.
Yeah, hold on, Sharon. Can we mute all, and then let's only go back to Sharon. Okay, let's try that a second time, Sharon. Thank you for your patience.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't have a little green box around my name. So, all right. So back to the airport, having to do with the expansion there and the fact that it is funded by federal dollars, most of it. I wasn't quite sure what percent of the total amount we actually had cash in hand versus that was still owed to us. And I question that because of how things are flip-flopping and wondered how secure those funds actually were. So that's got to do with the federal grants for the expansion. The other thing was the fact that the PFC's funding, the relationship that, and it wasn't referenced in the slides, so I think this relationship still exists, but I'm not sure because it's been a while. But there was a relationship between the airlines, the bigger ones that flew in and out, and the airport, that those dollars, there was a partnership, and those dollars would help us so that if indeed we didn't achieve the total dollar amount that we needed in that funding, that the airlines would kick in some dollars. And it wasn't referenced in the slide presentation. So if it's no longer something that is being done, fine. But if it's still being done, I would be interested to know if what dollar amount could be contributed by the airlines to our budget if we didn't achieve the goal. So sorry, that isn't worded very well, but I hope that Nick Lago understands what I'm asking. Thank you. The second thing has to do with BED. And why is the purchase power expected to decrease? The forecast was that it was going to be 18 million, and now we're budgeting for 17 million. And so what does our portfolio look like now with the lack of renewables that are available as our existing contracts end? I wasn't sure if the existing contracts could be renewed. Sometimes that was not possible. And I wondered if we were still getting a lot of renewables or some of the renewables from Maine. It seemed we had wind power and mainly from Maine, I believe. I did note that the rate increase that's being asked for, 4.5%, and all of that information is always helpful. All of the slides are incredibly useful. But I did notice that our commercial and industrial rates are higher than the other entities in Vermont. And I don't know if that plays a role and could harm us or not. And I didn't see that really addressed. I just saw it in the chart. So those are my comments. I look forward to hearing the presentations tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Is anyone else online for public comment? You could raise your hand if you are. Seeing none. I don't think I'm seeing anyone else. Okay, so I will close public forum and we will move on to our first presentation of the evening. Again, these meetings are designed for information purposes and we're not taking any votes here. So first up, we'll have our airport. Welcome. And I will turn the mic over to you if you both want to introduce yourselves before you get started from the BTV Patrick Leahy Airport.
We're just gonna present real quick. Give me just one moment, Mayor. Thank you. All right, perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. We're excited to be here tonight. Marie, you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. So I'm Marie Friedman. I'm
On.
the Director of
Just put your mic on.
Finance at the airport. Is it on?
Yep.
Push.
There you go.
There we go. Hi, I'm Marie Friedman. I'm the Director of Finance for the Burlington Airport. And I'm a longtime City of Burlington employee, which I'm very proud of. 31 years with 32 years, actually, with the City of Burlington.
Perfect. And my name is Nick Longo. I'm the Director of Aviation at the Leahy BTV Airport. We have a large summary for you, not just who we are, what we do, but of course what our upcoming fiscal year 2026 budget is. We provided a very high bird's eye view, if you will, of the airport in each sector that we generalize some of our projects in. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but these are kind of the high points when we talk about working with our federal partners, our state partners, local partners, not just within the city of Burlington, but also other municipalities like the cities of South Burlington, Winooski, Williston, Essex, and many others within Chittenden County. And then, of course, the many other items and concessions and real estate transactions that we accomplish every single year throughout the 900 acres that we manage out at that airport. It's very busy, and we have a very wonderful outlook into fiscal year 2026 and really into the calendar year of this year. To start off with, here's our high-level budget. When we start showing the numbers, you'll see that we have an operating budget of about $24 million, yet we manage that with around an FTE of about 52 people. So we're a very small group. We're working incredibly hard 24/7 under this organizational chart, generally under the pillars that I like to call, both within administration, finance, innovation and marketing, engineering and sustainability, as well as our operational group. And each one of those lines or buckets have the amazing team that work out at that airport, again, 24/7 in many different areas. Before we jump into fiscal year 2026, we always want to highlight our current fiscal year and some of the amazing items that we are and have accomplished. Many of these will be continued into fiscal year 2026, along with future years. As I like to say, we are BTV, boundless, transcendent, and visionary. We really highlighted and looked at lots of new initiatives this year. Very proud to say that we received, after about 2 years worth of work, our carbon accreditation at the American Council International, which is the only airport carbon accreditation in the world, the second one in New England to receive this accreditation. We're bringing on new concessionaires, Kestrel Coffee. We're working with them on expanding the opportunities at the airport, which the council has seen and approved this new concessions lease already, but that'll help us with revenues into fiscal year 2026. Launched a Sunflower program, which is a program that helps individuals with hidden disabilities ask for help, and we've trained our staff as well as outside airport staff to see essentially a lanyard with some sunflowers on them, and this is a national program that you can not just use at BTV but also throughout the country. Super excited and happy, especially sitting here next to Marie, to share that we've also received a credit rating upgrade for the first time in many, many years to the Baa1 stable outlook from Moody's Credit Agency. Again, a lot of involvement, a lot of work from Marie and her team to get this accomplished. And then the various other items in here are community involvement and airline engagement, introducing our new Arrow the Griffin mascot, as well as making sure we're presenting with the mayor at various chamber events and local events, and of course welcoming new airlines throughout this past year, but into the future as well. In fact, May 30th, we're going to be starting our new Charleston, South Carolina flight. These other items here are related to new opportunities for passengers. AeroPass, a program that passengers can enter our security area even if you don't have an airline ticket. We're able to accomplish that working with our TSA partners. And of course, Project Next, which I do have Councilor Busher's questions to answer in future slides. And we're excited to finish up Project Next, introduce that at an event that we're hosting on June 4th. When we look at our fiscal year 2026s and some high-level items associated with both our expenses and our revenues, you can see that we did look at a very conservative increase to our expenses, but only at about 1.2% year over year, which was not easy. We have a large budget, a $22 million budget on the expense side within our operations, and a 1.2% is just over $260,000. So it's a very nominal increase to that budget, which means Marie and the team really took a deep dive into every single line item to make sure that we can fit within our constraints. As far as the revenues, some highlights and new items this year. As part of an initiative to right-size the airport, not just with our physical space, but also our parking garage, and to alleviate some constraints and encourage car-sharing programs. For the first time in over 15 years, we are increasing our parking garage rates from $12 per day to $14 per day. This will add about $500,000 to our revenue line item, and again, right-size that parking garage stream and be consistent with our competitors throughout the region who are greater than this $14 per day on an equivalent parking scenario. We're also looking at a really healthy passenger growth. The rest of calendar year 2025, and I do have slides as an appendix to share with you some of those details. We're looking at a really healthy 930,000 scheduled seats into the airport and occupying about 80% of those, which would get us to about 720 to 730,000 outbound passengers. Multiply that by 2, so we're looking at close to 1.5 million passengers through the calendar year 2025, which is incredible and is truly the bottom line of everything we do, whether we're talking car rental concessions, restaurant concessions, parking garage. Our bottom line is our passenger growth.
We have a slide here that shows our operating revenues, and so our operating revenue total year over year, we're expected to increase by 5.6%. The largest area that we have, I should say a couple of larger areas, but our garage parking revenues, our budget that we had this year was for fiscal year 25, our current year was 7.18. We're expecting to see about 7.6 million in garage revenues, actual revenues coming in, so we're trending much higher than that. And so that factor into our parking garage rate increase is how we came up with our new number. We're also seeing we've seen year-over-year growth in our rental car revenues, and we're seeing those concession-related revenues going up as well. And that correlates with the increase in our passengers that are coming through. They come through and they do spend money. So overall, for our operating budgets, we're expecting 5.6% increase year over year. Next slide. On our expense side, we did work very hard to evaluate, discuss with all of our managers and team members to really try to, we always have projects that we have to maintain. We have a lot of infrastructure and we have a lot of things that are going on. And so there are costs that we can affect. And then there's costs that we can't really affect. So things like utilities and heating of the building and things like that are going to be the same regardless. So we have a lot of things that are sort of fixed. Our salaries and our benefits are, as far as dollar change, had really one of that had the biggest impact on here. We are level funded for our salaries and our benefits. We did see rises in health insurance costs, so that is having the impact. Also, our fiscal year 25 amended budget, while we have the same number of positions, we had maybe some turnover or something that wasn't filled, so that might be a little bit lower amended. So it looks a little bit like a little bit higher increase, but we're same over a year for the same number of individuals of positions. But overall, our overall budget, 1.2% increase is, we believe that is a fair representation of we can continue to do what we need to do with those budget numbers.
One thing we'll mention that was asked during the public comment period was an evaluation specifically to our operating expenses. It was relayed that there was some capture of revenue using passenger facility charges, which I'm going to put aside just for a second, because when we talk about our airline partners and we present our budget to our airline partners, they too have to not necessarily approve it, but agree as part of our airline agreement within our operating expenses. If there is a surplus associated with our end of year numbers, that surplus is in some form, usually around half of it, returned back to the airline. So there's no profit that we're looking at. We need to make a budget that fits within our expenses that we need to operate the airport. On the flip side, and to our advantage too, and I think this is what Sharon was talking about, if there's a deficit at the airport level, the airlines will pay for that deficit as well. So there's always an equal balance approach at the end of the year and a true up at the end of the year, surplus or deficit, to make sure that the numbers on especially these expenses that need to be recovered from a revenue standpoint are recovered or shared, depending on the scenario. We haven't had a deficit in 13 years since I've been at the airport, and certainly since Marie's been at the airport. We have had surpluses, very small surpluses associated with the airport and the airlines, which we always ask to return, and the airlines say, please spend it to the advantage of the airlines and their passengers and customers, which we generally use for a project of that sort. The passenger facility charge is a different program, and we can get to that in the next slide.
We will. Next slide.
Maybe.
So the last two slides, we're dealing with our operating revenues, our operating expenses. This slide, we wanted to separate out and show we have what we call non-operating revenues and we have non-operating expenditures. So we are finishing up. We are in the final year. We were fortunate enough to receive 3 different, we'll say, stimulus grant monies during the COVID days, and we are finishing up the last bit of that, which is that $870,000. So you're going to see it looks like a huge % change, but it's because we've had monies to spend these last few years, and we've been able to budget with those monies. And our PFC revenues, which we've had a little bit of discussion, that stands for passenger facility charge. There is a, on every ticket, that when you're, for Burlington, there's a $4.50 charge that goes along with every ticket. And that money comes back, the airlines submit that to the airport every single month. And all airlines, whether they're with us or whether they could be overseas airlines or other airlines, they are required to send it to us, and they do. And that money, what we do is, it is a program, the PFC program is run. We submit a package to the FAA. We consult with our airlines first, and then we submit a package to the FAA, which allows us to continue to collect, have the authority to collect this money, and then it allows us to present how we're going to spend that money. So we just recently, in this past year, a few months ago, we had an application for the PFC that the airlines agreed with, and we submitted that to the FAA, and they approved it. So those passenger facility, that money is restricted, and we are using it, a portion gets used on our debt, our revenue bond debts, which we have under the blue slides. We have some debt service there, so about $1 million a year goes from PFC to fund the debt service. We are also using it for our local shares on grants, and we're using it to fund some equipment purchases that we are doing, either buying outright or that we are lease financing, and so there's some of that is factored into this budget as well. So we have been with increased passengers. We are seeing increased revenues with PFC.
One important factor to that is PFCs cannot be used for our operating expenses. So it's a very, very specific account for mostly capital purchases or construction.
Yep. On our non-operating expenditure side, we have our debt service. These are capital leases that we have. And then we have some capital on the very bottom. That would be like equipment, new cars, or some of our new equipment that we plan to buy this upcoming year. So there's 2 other last things I'll talk about. One is on the blue side of the slide, which is the interfund transfers. We budget each and every year. This is primarily made up of local shares for our AIP grants, which we are subsequently able to use that PFC money on the green side to reimburse ourselves for the local shares. The state of Vermont gives us $500,000 each year to cover 6% of a grant. Unfortunately, that is not that isn't enough for us to cover that 6%. It's running short with the number of grants that we have, but we're happy that they're able to fund $500,000. So that local share, that is primarily what it is. And we're going to talk about the next project because that is a large expansion that we are in the middle of. There are some components of that project that are, we have a tremendous amount of funding, and we're continuing to get a tremendous amount of funding. So we already have in hand a $34 million congressional discretionary spending grant, thanks to the efforts of Senator Leahy and our Congress and our other senators in Congress folks. So we have that in hand. There's been no effect on any of our grants that we have in hand on the timing of reimbursements or anything of that nature. We also have some bill money that we've been, about 6.9, that we have a grant in hand already. We have some timber. It's called the NBRC, Northern Border Regional Commission, has given us a grant for just about $1.8 million. We're using mass timber within our project of our construction. So when you come and you are walking through our terminal, once we have this open, or if you want a tour once it goes in, it's going to start going in next week, you'll actually see a lot of mass timber that is being used, really instead of steel beams and other things. You'll see maple ceilings and things like that. So all of that was eligible under the Northern Border grant process. So we have a lot of grants that we have already secured and some that we have applications in for following projects. As part of that expansion, there are some portions. It's really a very small amount of the overall project, but there are some portions we're building a third floor, which is administrative office. That is not considered like part of the public space. We'll have we have conference room and we'll be able to use it for public space, but that part is not funded under the FAA AIP programs. So that's under $2 million. So I've tried to include enough in this interfund transfer to reflect that we'll have grant local shares that will ultimately be reimbursed under PFC, but we will have some portion. And so on the green side, on the very bottom, what I did, because this is a long-term asset that we are building, and it's not something that we're going to charge the airlines $2 million more this year to recoup the cost of building that third floor or some of our ineligible. We realize that this is a long-term project, and so that's really, we're looking at it as coming ultimately out of revenues and that we've accumulated over the years, so to fund this long-term project. So that's what that is. Next slide. So we have here some threats and some opportunities. So we are keeping our pulse, as I'm sure the mayor and Catherine, I'm sure that all departments, anybody who has federal grants, we're very closely monitoring it. We do that with our partners. We do that. There's a lot of resources that airport have that we are able to follow. We have not had any change or delays or any notifications that we have any change in delays of funding or reimbursements. We are monitoring it. The airline, we know that this is an industry that has its own set of it all has its own forces. It's a very large industry. There can be volatility within an airline industry, as with any industry. Ours has been very, very healthy, very robust. We've seen nothing but growth year over year. We are seeing numbers that I've never seen while being at the airport. And so we're seeing that, but it is always can be a potential for some opportunity or some volatility. And we have seen a reduction in our Canadian travelers. We really enjoy that they like to come. We're still seeing Canadian cars. We're not seeing as many. However, so far, our planes we're still seeing higher enplanements, and we still filled up over April break vacation. If anybody was trying to park at the garage that week. So but opportunities, so those are things we monitor. Opportunities, we're always looking any spaces that we have. We sometimes have turnover in our space or other things, so we're always looking to make sure we're fully rented, increase our revenues. We are having discussions with several partners about, and new folks to the airport about new leases being developed for either new tenants or new hangars and tenants. And we're always looking at opportunities. How do we ensure that we have enough parking on site for people who want to be parking at the airport? So we're always looking at that, and we look at that as an opportunity. It's a good thing for us.
I think that's probably one of the highlights where our parking garage 5 weeks out of the entire year is 100% full. Only 5 weeks out of the year, which is great. The rest of the time we're averaging between 70 and 80% occupancy, which is a great space to be in. When we did our cost-benefit analysis on the rate change associated with the garage, we realized that there may be some decreases in parkers to the garage. Again, like I said, we do want to continue encouraging growth with transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, as well as our ground transportation fleets like our taxi companies and other alternatives to get to the airport. Even biking, which we have a significant amount of biking, our bike parking within the garage. So increasing that access control and revenue control of our surface lots is going to be a big priority this year. So then when we do hit those caps, we have an alternate location, not just for our customers, but also our employees, which we have hundreds coming in and out of the airport every single day. And we're working within our constraints of where we are and the physical locations where we are to capture that additional revenue and changes. Really, the summary is right here. We see a very limited increase to our expenses, 1.2%, yet we have really worked hard to look at an increase of revenue of 5.6%, which we are able to hit our bond covenant and our debt ratios of 1.25 times. So this is a really, really great operating budget for us, not just for our credit agencies, but of course for our airlines and for us. Salaries and benefits, I don't think is a surprise, is our largest expense line item. And again, we continue to monitor that and continue to level staffing at the airport as much as we possibly can. We are building the largest terminal expansion that we've ever had at this airport, and we're doing that without financing. We're doing that without loans. We really worked hard for federal grant access to build not just a sustainable project, but also a project for right-sizing the fleet of aircraft that come into the airport, and we're extremely proud of that. And again, the bottom line for our entire budget is our passengers and the growth and the projection that we see for the rest of this year. Like I said in slides in this presentation, I'm not going to go through it unless of course there's questions. We do see an increase, not just an increase in our projected passenger, but the size of aircraft we've been talking about for many years is growing at the airport. But our load factors, or the amount of those seats that are actually occupied, is much different than back in 2008, which was the highest year for passengers at the airport. So big planes, and those planes are getting full, which goes to all of those revenue sources that you see there. Rental car agencies is a large one, $40 million gross revenues in that industry inside of the terminal building. Airlines, of course, are much larger than that. We have Skinny Pancake, Hudson News, and now Kestrel Coffee within the terminal, which provide those concession revenues to us. And then the rest of the 900 acres that we operate, not just on the expense side, which our biggest expense not only is the parking garage, it is the parking garage, but also our runway. We need to make sure that it's safe, and we're undergoing significant repairs to that runway, rehabilitation to that runway under scheduled maintenance in the next couple of months. So we have a really great outlook for the future of Leahy BTV, and really excited to present this budget for you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Marie. And I will say that Marie has been to the chaotic world of the federal government. I just want to publicly acknowledge Marie has really been advancing some innovation modeled for the city about proactively thinking about ways around the reimbursement strategies and the timelines of how we can limit the risk for the city. And we've used that to model other departments in their thinking of how to really proactively manage federal grants and make sure the city has limited liability I'm not saying this in the most articulate way, but I'm trying to say that I appreciate Marie's efforts to really be proactive and model the way for other city departments who also manage federal grants. So with that, are there questions for either Nick or Marie? Councilor Carpenter, it's been a very long day. I'm sorry, Councilor Carpenter.
From our end of town, it's hard to get a early morning transport to the airport. Ubers and Lyft is often unreliable. Okay on the way back, hard in the morning. And I'm just tossing out if you could think of a way to incentivize, because I don't know the taxi companies, because I don't take a cab very often, and if I do, I tend to just use my Uber app.
Yeah.
But I know there are licensed cabs out there who might come at 5 a.m., but I don't know who they are. And so then you're just in this cycle, okay, I'll just drive and park. And so I'm just tossing that out as, it should be on the way back too, and we've had complaints about lack of cabs. But I also think if you could get it on the morning side, particularly for people in Burlington.
Yeah.
So just think about that.
Yeah, I think two parts to that. So the transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft, we are seeing growth in those companies. We saw a 26% growth year over year from fiscal year 24 into 25, utilizing Uber and Lyft, which is close to $100,000 a year in our revenue streams. We receive $2 per pickup and drop off at the airport. That's growing. Those opportunities are growing, but they're not meeting the demand at all. I think Councilor Barlow can speak maybe more eloquently to this, where the Vehicle for Hire Board has really worked hard to look at incentives to grow, or rather incentivize taxi cab companies operating during those obscure hours, like 7 p.m. I can't remember what the hours off our hand, but 9 p.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning, where there are surcharges that these small companies, usually owner-operator companies, can charge a little bit more by working those hours to accommodate more opportunities for passengers in the region.
And I was just, that's great. And maybe a little more marketing help, because who are they? If I Google them up, who are they?
I see.
Thank you,
Yeah, that makes
Councilor
sense.
Carpenter. Yeah. Other questions? Councilor Barlow.
Thank you for the presentation. I had a couple of questions. One you've sort of addressed, which is like, everybody's wondering about, when the next shoe from the federal government's going to drop and we have to cancel some big project or find alternative funding sources. So thank you for that. And I know that, we just have to stay tuned and be vigilant. I did have questions about like the mix of airlines. I know that in other presentations, you've indicated that Burlington is one of the busiest airports in the region.
Yep.
And can you talk a little bit about trends for, I know you have some slides to this, but just to put some narrative around it, some trends for commercial airlines and passenger volumes. And do you see those trending up significantly over the next, or what is the trend over the next, say, couple of years? And then the other question I had was about the mix of airlines, and do we have any carrier who represents a disproportionately large share of the capacity, and if they were to make some strategic change about where they wanted to be or when they wanted to fly, would that be disruptive to the airport? I know that we had JetBlue pull out a couple, 4 years ago maybe now, and they were one of the bigger carriers, or they seem to be taking up some of those spots that everybody liked. And so I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about trends with the commercial airline industry. It's hard to predict, but we're in constant contact with our incumbent airlines, our existing airlines today, to make sure that they're healthy, that they fly and operate a financially sustainably a market for our region. And we offer some incentives for those airlines, like marketing, to grow their reach and make sure we retain passengers within our area. It's working. We know it's working because our airlines consistently add additional services, because our load factors or the amount of seats filled are high. So these planes are bigger, but the seats on them are filled more often, which means the demand is there, so the opportunities for additional seats and growth on our existing market needs to grow. So that's our trend for our existing airline. New airlines, I can tell you that we are talking to many, less than a handful, but in my mind, that's many airlines, especially in our country, that are extremely interested in Burlington because of those demands out of this area. In fact, I'm on the road at the end of the month or beginning of June to talk to about half a dozen to a dozen new airlines to grow opportunities at the airport. And once a year, I always visit headquarters to meet with senior leadership at these airlines. The mix of airlines, that's a really good question. There's something called the Southwest effect in our industry, which came from a term where Southwest Airlines usually went into a market and overtook a market and utilized maybe 60, 70, 80% of the diversity of that market share, which goes to exactly your question. When the airline, Southwest in this case, chose to leave the market, it left the airport in a really, really tricky position. We don't have that. Our highest percentage of share with our airlines is split between American and United, each one about 27 to 30% of our market share at the airport. Delta is about in the 20s and usually fluctuates. At the time JetBlue left and for the last 10 or so years, they were only 7% of our market share. So we're really, really small share. Of that share of JetBlue, though, even though our direct flight was to New York, 70% of those passengers through JetBlue were going to the Florida market. So when we introduced Breeze Airways to the market, we didn't see any loss of passengers. In fact, we're seeing a growth in passengers because the opportunity, and to be honest, the opportunity to go direct Burlington to the destination that you want to go to is really appeasing to a customer or a family or even a business partner. But that mix of airlines is incredibly important to make sure that we don't grow in any one sector too large, and we make sure that the competition between those sectors is healthy. For example, Chicago is primarily run by United Airlines. Chicago is United Airlines' hub. They own a large part of O'Hare Airport. But American Airlines decided to compete with that and bring in additional service to Chicago and drove those costs to that market down just a little bit. And so that diversification of the airline portfolio creates that opportunity, not just for the advantage of a passenger and a ticket purchaser, but also to make sure that we don't hit that Southwest effect.
Thank you. And my last question, just to rip down something that Councilor Carpenter was asking about, was sort of transportation to and from the airport. I've noticed, and I've heard from constituents, that it's often difficult to get parking in the garage at the airport. I've seen utilization when I go to btv.aero of like 90% plus sometimes, and in busy times when people want to travel, like a school break week. And in my last time out there seemed to be there's a significant part of the garage that's unavailable for parking because of construction and because of plans. And I'm wondering if you anticipate that will ease over the next year, or if not, when will it ease, and when will there be more capacity?
Yeah, like I said before, our parking garage is our most expensive asset that we own at that airport. We spend a lot of time in there making sure that it's maintained and looks good. And we learn too as we grow and as we put construction funds into the parking garage. The last 2 years, we've accomplished a $2 million upgrade to the parking garage. A lot of it's not noticeable to the public, but it's our fire alarm system, our suppression system, our lighting, all sorts of different things, which required, in all honesty, more closures than we were expecting with our contractor. We're now at the back end of that, and we're completing that project, and we're also pretty much mandating that we're not under construction during peak holiday season, which is pretty much November through April vacation, not that entire time frame, but especially certain points in that time frame, so that we accomplish our routine maintenance as well as our larger maintenance in the garage at more ideal times. Those percentages that you see are reflective of those closures. So when we close 150 spots, those are not on the divisible number of the percentage. Yeah. And so when we open those, of course, that's going to drop down into the 80s. And right now we are significantly open. I think we have less than 50 or so spots that are closed today.
No, that's excellent news. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Further questions? Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. So my question is about it's about the impact of Canadian tourism. I know in the slideshow you said that anecdotally it seems like less Canadian travelers are at the airport, but it's if that's true, it's right now it's likely being supplemented in terms of revenue by something else. But it hasn't even been 6 months. Since January. So if those trends do start to impact the airport significantly, what is the airport's role to play in trying to bring those folks back? Because that's a Burlington question that requires multiple parties in Burlington to play a role, but what is the airport's part of that plan that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think when we look at Canadian travel a little bit higher level and longer term, especially when we look pre-pandemic to today, we haven't seen the growth of the Canadian traveler, most likely because of the exchange rate and the differences there. There's a huge difference there. Those percentages are single digits since the pandemic. Those are usually around 9%, maybe sometimes in the peak periods, 12%, or some Canadian holidays. We certainly see larger numbers, and we haven't seen that change too much since the pandemic. Nevertheless, it's still an important partner of ours to make sure that we communicate and respectfully advertise that we're here and we're ready when a Canadian traveler is ready. And even though the exchange rate is still there, a Canadian tax on a U.S. domestic flight is still very expensive to travel out of Canada into the U.S. One concern that we have, which may help our situation, that's kind of a backwards statement, but one thought that we have that may help the situation is it's an unfortunate situation where a lot of Canadian airlines are looking to decrease U.S. service. And that's a big problem because especially Toronto, Montreal, and those folks, they like to travel to Florida and warmer destinations during the winter time. So that's going to have some impact, which may drive additional Canadian traffic down to Burlington or other northern border states to have that opportunity to fly to a warmer destination. As far as the collaboration goes, you're 100% right. It's not just the airport, it's not just the city, it's all of us that really have to communicate that. We've put together a group utilizing a lot of brain power and a lot of great partnerships with BCA and Church Street Marketplace, both with Doreen and Cara and many other people's help to try to understand, as well as Hello Burlington and Love Burlington, understand how can we communicate that better. And I've also started a program where we're reaching out to U.S. companies to understand their market needs, and that extends across the border so that we can truly one-on-one talk to some Canadian companies to say, what do you need help with that this airport can help you with your U.S. travel needs? So there's a lot of momentum around those conversations, but you're spot on in making sure that continues.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Broderick. Are there additional questions? Councilor Newbeezer.
Could you just speak a little more to, you mentioned the relationship between the airport and Uber and Lyft and how it's beneficial for revenue. Could you just lay that out a little more in detail, just that relationship, but then also the relationship between cabs and the airport?
Okay, great. Yeah, so there's a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, back in 2017, I believe it was, that outlined costs associated with city travel as well as airport-specific travel, and that agreement with all TNC networks, transportation network companies, at the airport specifically is a $2 per pickup and drop-off fee. Again, that's $80,000 to $100,000 of our revenue, and an increase year over year in operations at the airport, which is great. As far as taxi cab companies, the airport doesn't go through the process of taxi licensing at this point. However, we do have our own taxi system, and queue permit is what we call, and we do charge, I think it's $500-something a year for that queue opportunity at the airport. And going back to previous questions, we've actually increased that number of queue permits, not for the revenue purposes, but to allow the opportunity for more taxi companies to utilize the airport, and maybe a little bit more competition. So those are the relationships between those two sectors of ground transportation.
All right, thank you, Councilor. Any additional questions from councilors, online or in person? A reminder online just to raise your Zoom hand. Okay, seeing, Councilor Broderick?
I wanted to see if anyone else wanted to speak first. Also on transportation, I was just reminded, and this, I want to see what you guys know. It's in regards to GMT's relationship to the airport. I don't remember if any changes to the routes to the airport have been made yet off the top of my head, but if they have, can you talk about them? And if, I'm not sure, we talk about like how can we, like as Councilor Carpenter said, how can we get more people down to the airport, and if an airport shuttle by the airport or in collaboration with one of the transportation companies around here has been brought up at all?
Yeah, there is going to be impacts to the GMT route at the airport, and it's not just an impact to our passengers and anybody flying in and out, but also our employees. Not just internal city employees, but the employee network at the airport, airlines, et cetera. And that's a big concern. We do have utilization, but it's not high utilization, which of course may have been part of the decision process. And we have been having some conversations with GMT in that regards to make sure, to see if there's opportunities to retain that service or to switch other service around if there is opportunity there. We have not yet talked about airport shuttles or airport-operated shuttle services yet, but it could be something in the future that we talk about if GMT changes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm also mindful of what time it is. This is our first presentation, so you always get a little bit more time than I will probably give to other departments.
That
But
was
just as
15 minutes?
Yeah, this was supposed to be 15 minutes, Nick.
Sorry.
Nice job. So but that's more in context for councilors as we get into the rhythm. We obviously have 18 departments, so we want to be mindful of time. So with that, I'm going to thank our airport team. Thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation and for also going first. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Happy to, thank you.
Next up, we're going to have the Burlington Electric Department team on up. So I'll let them get set up, and then we will dive in. And I'm going to challenge our BED colleagues to maybe stick around 40 to 45 minutes, and we'll see if we can start to bring our average down a little bit. I know, which is why he's drinking his iced coffee. He's ready to go, and we're going to also, that's just a reminder to counselors, though, to try to keep this within 40 to 45 minutes. Future meetings will have more departments in the same night, so we will all work as a team to just triage our questions, and of course, you can contact department heads outside of meetings, of course, as well. Is that enough filibustering?
We're ready.
Okay, excellent. Passing it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Board of Finance, City Councilors. I'm Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric, joined by my colleagues Munir Casti, Emily Stebbins-Wheelock, Mike Canerick here in person. My colleague James Gibbons is online. And we're going to pull up our slides and get right into it. I should note we're going to cover our budget and our FY26 rate request because those will travel essentially together and are obviously related. So we'll go ahead into the first slide, I think is just our org chart here. We have 123 FTE, that's level between 25 and 26. You can see here not only at 585 Pine Street, but also in the generation team that Munir manages. So fairly similar, I think, to what we would have presented last year. So we'll move right along. So obviously one of the key pieces for us, and it does get into some of the federal issues that I think could be discussed as well, is we want to keep investing in strategic electrification and in the efforts to support our net zero energy progress in the city. We continue, and you can see the $1.6 million in funding for electrification rebates, $2 million in funding for efficiency programs and incentives. We continue to invest in electrification at a level well above what would be required to meet the state's Tier 3 program requirements under the Renewable Energy Standard on purpose, both because we know it's good climate policy, it's also good business practice because we're going to grow sales over time in a way that is efficient and contribute to the benefit of all ratepayers, provided we do so while managing peak demand. So all the incentives that I think Burlingtonians know that we offer, everything for heat pumps, EVs, e-bikes, electric lawnmowers, geothermal test wells, et cetera, all continuing in the FY26 budget. We have matching funds in the budget for federal grants that we are able to access, primarily related to demand response, and that includes programs that are going to help us with having heat pumps move from being on the residential rate to potentially having a heat pump special bill credit that we've talked about with the council. We also have funding for a second all-electric bucket truck. We had the first in Vermont. We're hoping to have a second very soon. We have state grant funding for that. We'll touch on this a little more in the threats and opportunities, but EV charging, we do have funding through the revenue bond to continue to invest in a bank of 4 level 3 fast chargers and then 10 level 2 public EV chargers in FY26. We're going to get our first electric forklift and continue to invest in EV charging at our own facilities so we can facilitate transitioning our fleet away from fossil fuels and towards electric. We have capital investments through our revenue bonds in relicensing Winooski 1 Hydro, which is a pretty intensive process that we have to go through with FERC. It's still several years away from deadline, but you have to start very early and go through a pretty intensive process to get it relicensed. We have funding for the McNeil wood chip dryer to make McNeil more efficient, utilized waste heat to dry the wood chips, a variety of IT and distribution system upgrades. And we have in this budget the issuance cost for the next tranche of net zero energy revenue bond that was approved by voters in November of 2024. We're currently still spending through the original $20 million that was authorized by voters in December of 2021. And I mentioned those new rates for heat pumps and load management, so we'll go to the next slide. Also, continuing to invest significantly in equity and accessibility. You will see as well when we bring our rate change for FY26, a tariff proposal that we have to change our energy assistance program, which, as you know, provides a 12.5% bill discount to income-eligible customers, and which we were able to triple enrollment for in the prior fiscal year. We're going to be expanding that to cover nonprofit shelters that serve unhoused customers, community members, Burlingtonians. So any of the shelters in the city that are serving the unhoused population will be newly eligible. We heard directly from one shelter that they were struggling with their energy bills, and that wasn't anything we could do under the current program to make them eligible. So this tariff change will help with that and provide them the 12.5% discount. So we will be bringing that to the Board of Finance along with our rate case on May 19th and to this full council on June 2nd. It'll also allow us, in some cases, to work with affordable housing providers who pay the electric bill for their residents. Currently, if the resident pays the bill, they're already eligible for the program. If the provider pays the bill, we'll be able to pass along the 12.5% discount provided they can demonstrate that it's going to be shared with the resident, that it's not going to be just retained by the organization, but it's going to be passed through as a savings in some way, shape, or form to the resident. So that'll be in the tariff proposal as well. We're working with Water Resources to support their own equity initiatives, particularly helping them through the electric bill be able to help renters who they may not have a direct way to provide support and assistance to, that we'll be able to help them do that through the electric bill. We have a number of different communication efforts. We continue through the great work of our equity and sustainability team, making videos translated, as you can see, 19 different languages. We have a new one on weatherization, what it means, how it works, who can access it, and we're going to continue to do creative things with videos and translation, try to reach as many members of the community as we can. Itameno continues to host office hours at these variety of locations around the community: King Street Laundromat, Family Room, BHA, Community Gardens. Again, doing great work expanding our outreach to customers in places where maybe we haven't been in the past for BED. We continue to partner with a number of great organizations: CVOEO, Legal Aid, AALV, Vermont Language Justice Task Force, and others on a variety of these efforts. And we're really happy to continue to participate at a variety of community events. We were just at Earth Day on the Marketplace. We're looking forward to Juneteenth. We'll be at the Lake Monsters. And new this year, we're going to be having our F-150 Lightnings connected to induction cooking. And we'll be able to demo not only the ability to do induction cooking, but to run it off of your electric truck. So we'll have that at, I think, at Juneteenth and at the Lake Monster Games as well. The mayor saw an early demo of that just recently. Chocolate pretzels was the cooking. I'm going to pass it to Emily for a few slides here.
Okay, good evening. So I think the next, yes, cost savings. So we have included a version of the slide in our budget presentation for, I think, past 10 years, kind of showing there's certain expenses in our budget that we have absolutely no control over, transmission being the biggest one. So we show here how we are controlling what we can control. So this is all operating and maintenance expenses without transmission, without Vermont RES compliance costs, without EEU, energy efficiency utility expenses. To get to this budget that we present to you tonight, we made $810,000 worth of cuts to non-power supply O&M, including $300,000 in vacancy savings. And the red line sort of shows the trajectory that Burlington Electric was on prior to FY16, average increases annually about 5.8%. Since FY16, we're now on average about 4.2%. So we've been able to moderate those increases in the pieces of expense that we can affect. I'll go now through the details of the budget. This is our operating revenues. The first bullet under there is perhaps the most important. So this is everything equal, our revenues would have gone up 1.5%. That's how much sales are projected to increase, which is not very much when you think about the cost of everything. A 3% COLA, right? Like you need your operating revenues to go up way more than that. So that's all we're projecting to get out of sort of normal or projected load growth. To counter that or to make the budget balance, we have projected a 4.5% rate increase starting September 1st. We'll go into the details of that in the second half of the presentation. Also notable here, you'll see that miscellaneous revenues power supply is up 1.8 million over the FY25 budget. That is significant and that is a help in this budget. REC prices are strong right now. The average REC price projected for this budget is $38 compared to $33 that was budgeted in FY25. So overall operating revenues are up 7.5% in this budget. On operating expenses, you'll see overall, the budget is up 9%, with some elements being up none and some elements being up a lot. The biggest increase, as I mentioned before, is transmission. This was the biggest increase last year as well, I believe. That's up $1.5 million. And that's something we have absolutely no control over, which is difficult to absorb. Fuel prices, fuel expense is up the next most, 13% increase. Reasons for that are twofold. One, significantly, the capacity factor assumed for the McNeil plant is higher this year. And in order to support that higher capacity factor, we've budgeted a slightly higher wood fuel price. Running McNeil more allows us to bring that purchase power expense down. So the fuel cost is higher, yes, but net power supply was more favorable under those assumptions than with a lower capacity factor for McNeil, which is why we budgeted that way, to moderate any, further rate pressure than we're already dealing with.
And just because this was former Councilor Busher's question, or one of the questions, I just wanted to point out that the FY25 forecast was not a forecast for the 26 budget, but it's actually an updated look at the FY25 budget itself. So as is shown here, we had some upward pressure in power supply in FY25, and it's been moderated in FY26 because we're assuming what's historically a more normal capacity factor at McNeil, while also being able to reduce some of our reliance on the region as a whole. So.
Let's see, and then in O&M here, I'll just note some of the drivers of the increase. Labor COLAs are up 3% according to our IBEW contract. Labor overhead, which is benefits, pension, that's up 9.4%. I'm sure the rest of the city is looking at that same level of increase. We have some new programs that we're offering. Darren mentioned the heat pump rate program, which is great, but that's 50% grant funded, so you have to put the other 50%. Well, actually, you have to put the whole expense in your expense budget because it's all going to be expensed, and then 50% of it will be reimbursed. So that O&M line is up for some good reasons, like that program. Also, our annual compliance expense for the Vermont Renewable Energy Standard is up. Tier 3 expenses are up because our annual compliance obligation increases every year. And we also have a new category called Tier 5, where we have to retire RECs from relatively new renewable resources to cover any load growth over calendar 2024. So that's the first year that we're seeing that expense as well. I'm gonna move now to the below the line other income and deductions. Significant here is the other income is a big percent variance, but a very small actual dollar variance. You'll see grants and capital contributions is down quite a lot. Customer contributions from capital are budgeted at $1.2 million. So the big difference is the change in grant revenue. Last year we budgeted for a significant FEMA grant for replacing the Winooski 1 dam that was damaged in the July 2023 floods. That project is done, so we're left with about $600,000 worth of grant revenue for the flexible road program that Darren mentioned, as well as a software system grant that we have from the state of Vermont.
Okay. So threats and opportunities, I think former Councilor Busher mentioned this as well. Lack of available renewables in the market as we have contracts that expire. And we have one that expires at the end of this year that we signed about a year ago with First Light for hydro from Connecticut, which replaced hydro that we had from Great River in Vermont. It is very difficult. We are actively in the market seeking these contracts, whether it's for hydro or wind, and we are seeing constraints. And when I think about it, some of the federal actions are going to further increase those constraints because The relationship now with Canada has led Hydro-Quebec to sell less energy into New England. They paused sales to the spot market in New England. They've paused work on lines they were going to use to connect in New York and Massachusetts. So that's one big potential renewable source that's being curtailed in some respects. And the other big renewable source that we expected to come into the region is offshore wind. They have canceled leases at the federal level, and the offshore wind that's being built is coming in above cost, significantly in some cases. None of it was contracted for by BED, but still we were hoping that having a lot of offshore wind come into the region would help relieve some of the constraints on renewables. So we need more renewables being built in New England and accessible in New England, and I would put Vermont in that category. And there are a lot of constraints to building new renewables that we can touch on. Emily mentioned transmission costs. So this is another issue that we've talked about with Velco and with the Department of Public Service. We can't directly control it, but as a state and our governor and our different utilities collectively working together with other states can put some pressure on entities that are large, for-profit developers that are active in other states that are putting these costs onto Vermont ratepayers for them to be able to scale back, develop more efficiently, have greater oversight. The transmission development process is such that it's typically interstate. It's typically regulated at some level at the federal level as opposed to stringently at the state level. There's, in our view, not enough oversight, not enough efficiency, and too much opportunity to just put costs on ratepayers for projects that may or may not be needed for reliability. So we've asked for greater scrutiny. We've asked for greater regional coordination because that line continues to increase in a way that's unsustainable, not just for us, but probably for every Vermont utility and others in the region. Emily mentioned the increase in renewable energy standard obligations. That's not a bad thing. We supported the renewable energy standard update in 2024, but we acknowledge there's some additional costs that will incur related to that. We are starting to see tariff impacts on some of the things we buy, and I think Munir told me the other day, if we're looking for a transformer, 2 years at least? 2 years. Yeah, so, didn't used to be that way. It didn't used to be you had to wait 2 years or plan 2 years out to get a transformer. So constraints there are significant. Our EV charging grant, just under $5 million, continues to be frozen by the current administration in Washington, and we will continue to fight to access those funds, but we're not certain of the path forward there. And obviously, we continue to face, as everybody does, some upward pressure on COLAs and health and benefits. On the opportunity side, over the next several years, we're going to implement a number of key software and technology transitions that are going to enable more dynamic rates. They're going to enable us to communicate in interesting and new ways with customers around outages and programs and give customers better access to their data. Sales and strategic electrification continue to be a great opportunity. We want to electrify everything that we can, move people off of fossil fuel, keep more dollars local, and use those revenues locally to support our budget, support our ratepayers. The timing of the next revenue bond issuance, we're looking into that. We're also looking into partnering with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to potentially support that issuance. We have a good credit rating of A3. They have a higher credit rating and may be able to support some cost savings there, so we're going to explore that opportunity. EU regulatory reform means the future of our efficiency programs, and we've had legislation that we've supported and in some cases initiated over the past 6 years that have enabled us to use some of our efficiency dollars in more creative ways. And the example I always like to cite is it let us support geothermal test wells, and we supported one at the high school and it worked, and they're going to have a geothermal system at the new high school. We need that kind of creative thinking at the state level. There is not necessarily full support for that continuing, and we're going to be actively advocating, particularly next year, because that's the last year of our current authorization for this pilot program, to continue to have access to these funds in a more innovative way, more forward-looking way. Saving a kilowatt hour on your electric bill was the challenge of the 1970s and 1980s, and we did a great job of responding to that through our efficiency program. But reducing carbon and reducing fossil fuel use beyond just the electric sector and using electricity as a solution to that is the opportunity we have. And we need to repurpose some of our efficiency funds and thinking to address that challenge. And then lastly, as we've discussed at length, we see a lot of opportunities for efficiency and innovation at McNeil. We have a battery storage RFP that was issued earlier this year. We're likely to reopen that to ask for updated pricing now that the tariffs have taken effect, so we can get a sense of that. But we see opportunity for battery storage, including at McNeil. We obviously see opportunity for efficiency with the wood chip dryer. We did engineering work on it this fiscal year. We have funds in the next budget to really begin the implementation process there. And we have the McNeil RFPs that are going to give us information as well about other opportunities for efficiency. Okay, let me move off of that slide. And I think we have just a couple more on the budget, and then we can touch on the rate case.
So here's the bottom line. When you put the revenues and expenses together, we're budgeting for a net operating loss of $1.5 million and a total net income of just over $2 million, $2.2 million. And we're projecting an ending operating cash balance on June 30, 2026 of $13.2 million, just about where we're projecting to end this fiscal year, and quite a bit more than we budgeted to land this fiscal year. The bottom chart is about our capital spending. You'll notice the capital budget is significant, $15.2 million. That's the highest capital budget I think we've ever had. It's over $3 million more than last year's capital budget. Projecting about $3 million of it will be funded through the GO bond and $12.2 million from revenue bond. That's finishing out the first revenue bond and then starting the second revenue bond. Timing on that TBD. And I'm watching our burn rate through the last revenue bond closely. So Darren mentioned a few of the significant things in the capital budget, and we debated this or talked about it as a management team. That is a big number. There's several sort of one-time things in it, many of which, or some of which at least, involve sort of outside entities and not necessarily all our own resources to do. Significantly, the relicensing of the Winooski 1 dam through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, $1.2 million in this year's capital budget, most of which is going to go to consultants and engineers to study fish and wildlife and eel passage and salmon passage through up and downstream. So there's many sort of fish and wildlife studies that have been directed that we have to do per FERC as part of this license renewal application. So that's one example. It will take BD team to sort of oversee that work, but most of it is going to be paying outside folks to come in and conduct those studies for us. The distribution piece of that $15.2 million is $6.4 million. Of that, $1.2 million is our new SCADA and advanced distribution management system. So if you take that out, the distribution capital budget is pretty much in line where it has been the past couple years. Similarly, for McNeil, the wood chip dryer is a significant expense. That's $625,000. Without that, the capital budget for McNeil is not out of line. Transformers have gotten harder to come by and more expensive. There's $1.5 million in the distribution budget for transformers alone. And then the IT projects, that's again sort of a big overhaul that we're going through to update all of these enterprise systems. There's about $2 million worth of capital spending in there. So I just wanted to linger a bit on the capital amount because it is high. And then this is sort of what we aim our whole budget toward, is getting these numbers here to be where they need to be in the range, because these are the metrics that Moody's uses in our credit rating. So this budget is planning for 135 days cash on hand, counting the $10 million line of credit. It's projecting a debt service coverage ratio. We have to be at least 1.25. We're projecting 4.77. And then the adjusted debt service coverage ratio, which is always the challenge, we're budgeting here for a 1.15, which is below where we were last year at FY25. But given all of the different pressures and wanting to keep the rate increase lower than it was last year, this is what we've done.
And I think we had,
That's it for that piece.
that's the budget piece. If it's your preference, we can move relatively quickly through the rate slides and then take questions at the end. Okay, we'll do this a little quicker. So 4.5%, you can see here the history of rate changes. Obviously, we've had rate changes more consistently post-pandemic. Other than the 7.5% initial one in 2021, they've been kind of mid to low single digits. Our goal was to come in lower than 5.5 because that was the rate change last year. We're at 4.5, so we've been able to lower it a bit. Next slide. You can see here we've been asking in almost every case for less than what we could justify at the PUC, in some cases quite a bit less, because we're balancing wanting to meet our different metrics and have financially healthy and strong metrics, while also not wanting to increase rates significantly on ratepayers. So those lighter blue lines are the appropriate level you could justify at the PUC, and the darker line is what we've actually asked for. And we're still doing the cost of service for 2025, so we'll update that. So the next couple slides, just to put in context, we're seeing really consistently increased costs in the electric sector generally. And I'll go actually to the next slide, which makes this point. If you look at what's happening in Rhode Island and Massachusetts over the last few months, it makes Vermont's relative increases, relatively modest increases, look pretty good. These utilities in these states are more exposed, I think, to the market than we are, and the volatility. So you've seen, really, really dramatic increases in some cases. People's bills have been, doubling in some cases. And Massachusetts, for example, the governor just put, I think it was $125 million from a clean energy program and used it for a one-time $50 bill credit in everybody's bill in April, just to try to provide some relief. So just to give a sense of, we talked about like the transmission, the upward pressure. We do face the transmission upward pressure. We avoid a lot of that market-based pressure where people are exposed to natural gas prices by being 100% renewable, having long-term stably priced power, which is what Vermont has chosen over what might be operational in other places. And you can see here, natural gas is the driver of these spikes. And we are much more limited in our exposure to that than I think other places. So just for context, that's important. So you can see here the proposed increase in the context of other different factors like inflation. We continue to be below inflation over that time frame. You can see medical and housing also. We'll jump next. I think this touches on former Councilor Busher's question in a moment. So our residential rates continue to be, even post this potential rate increase, far lower than not only Vermont, but far lower than the region. And important to note that Vermont is now the lowest electric rates in the 6-state New England region by a decent amount. And so for us, not only being below the regional average, but being below the Vermont average means our residential customers have some of the best rates of anybody in New England. And the line below there, you can see the rate for the Energy Assistance Program customers is obviously even more favorable relative to the regular rate. So in terms of our commercial and industrial rate, as former Councilor Busher noted, it's slightly above the Vermont average. It continues to be below the New England average. So we have a slightly higher than Vermont average commercial industrial rate. There are certainly utilities that have higher rates than us, but if you look at the average over time, we're not that far off, but we're fairly close. On the other hand, Vermont's rates are the lowest in the region, and we continue to be below the regional average as well. And then this is the total, including all rate classes. We continue to be below the Vermont and New England average as well. Here you can just see what this rate case looks like from a bill perspective. You can see for a residential customer, about a $3.78 impact, and for a small general, which is about 2/3 of our commercial customers, it'd be a $4.81 impact on a typical bill. And then lastly, the Energy Assistance Program credit is a percentage-based credit, so as rates go up, or as bills potentially increase, it provides even more support. So for those customers, the bill impact is an estimate of $374 a month. But you can see the credit actually becomes a little bit larger post-rate change because it's percentage-based, it's not flat. And we are hopeful to, particularly with the tariff change, enroll more customers in that program and see continued upward movement in that program, have more residential customers be enrolled. So I think that's our last slide. We are glad to answer questions, and hopefully we're relatively timely compared to our predecessors.
Always the competitive one. Thank you very much to you and your whole team, Darren. Questions from the councilors? Councilor Carpenter. Could you use your mic? Thank you.
I've asked this before, but I'm doing this a little bit for the public. We have some number of constituents who very repeatedly tell us that if we got rid of McNeil, we'd stop losing money. And could you just speak to that briefly?
Certainly. McNeil isn't losing us money, and I think if you look at the, those factors of what's going on in other states, if we were to lose McNeil and be exposed to the natural gas market, we would be at risk of potential volatility that we've never seen, I think, in recent decades in Burlington. So, actually having a little bit more production at McNeil that's closer to normal levels, not beyond normal levels, helps our budget relatively. But I think it's a mistake to look at it only in that context or only in isolation. We can make a very good point, as we have with analysis, that it over the last 10 years, you count all the value streams, it provided $7 to $14 million of net benefit to Burlington ratepayers and Burlingtonians. But really, I think that people's focus is not specifically on the economics, it's on the environmental footprint. And we want to work, and the mayor has outlined with us a plan to work on that environmental footprint, a first part of which is having this negotiation with the joint owners to see if we can have full control of the facility. If we're able to obtain that in combination with efforts like the wood chip dryer, we see a pathway to reducing the stack emissions by the 50% margin that the council had spelled out as being a desirable margin. So I think we get into the economic argument in part because there's concern about the environmental footprint, and we want to address that concern in a thoughtful way. It may not be without cost to address that footprint, but we'll bring that to the council in a transparent way, and we can have that conversation with the community.
Thank you, Councilor. Other questions? We're going in the same order. Councilor Barlow.
And thank you for the presentation. I had a couple of questions. The first is, we've seen sort of changing priorities at the state level around climate policy, and do any of those affect any of your electrification initiatives? And I'm sorry I didn't send these to you.
No, it's okay. It's a good question. Yeah, I think there's a couple of concerning points at the state level right now. I would name three. One is I've heard at least some level of concern about implementation of the Clean Cars and Trucks program, and the state has been pretty consistent with California and a handful of other states in implementing those programs. And I don't think anything has happened yet, but I've heard concern about the opportunity to potentially not see that get implemented or delays in implementation. And what that means is that Burlingtonians and Vermonters will not have access to EV inventory and heavy-duty trucks. And as we pointed out, we're trying to buy a second all-electric bucket truck, and we try to buy other heavy-duty equipment like electric forklifts. These rules, as I understand them, will help make that more available for manufacturers to us in the future. And so I'd hate to see a delay in that for unfounded reasons. I know that there are fossil fuel interests that are advocating against that. We would certainly be on the other side of that argument in support of those rules. The second one would be that the fact that the clean heat standard is essentially on pause is not helpful to us broadly in our efforts to support more weatherization, electrification, et cetera. It won't impact our programs directly, but it potentially impacts the ability of other partners to invest in that space. And then lastly, as mentioned, I think we really need a little bit of forward-looking vision on the efficiency programs. And I think we're caught a little bit in the old paradigm and not wanting to move forward into the new paradigm. And we're going to need leadership, and we've had some, certainly, but we're going to need more leadership, I think, next year in the legislative process and with the administration on implementing a longer-term path to evolve the efficiency programs to meet the needs we have now.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned that Hydro-Quebec has cut back on the amount of power they're selling. And so given that and given, I guess, just given that, are you finding that you're running McNeil more?
We haven't, but we are finding that it's harder to find replacement resources for some of those expiring contracts, because I think there's more competition now for renewables, which is a good thing, but there's not enough supply. And I think the short-term impact with Hydro-Quebec is, all things equal, if they don't sell into the spot market, prices will go up, because you're going to take a decent chunk of supply offline. Now, we have a contract through the state where we get 15% of our power, roughly. That's not affected, that's not impacted. We're continuing to get roughly 15% of our power from Hydro-Quebec under contract through 2038. Other utilities get 40 or more percent. But when they sell into the spot market, they alleviate some of that pressure that was there that we talked about from natural gas prices. And by not doing that, they're going to, all things equal, would put upward pressure on prices that I think other states that are more exposed to the market might see more impact than we are.
Thank you. And then lastly, I heard the mention of the chip dryer. Is that something that you expect to have online in 2026 or
not online?
No?
That would be great, but I don't think that's realistic. What we're looking at is a 2-year implementation in all likelihood. So we have engineering work that's going on now to look at it, and the idea is to capture waste heat from the facility that would otherwise be lost, use it to dry the wood chips and have a better moisture content so that they are able to be used more efficiently. So the engineering's happening now in fiscal 25. We have a consultant on board. The goal would be in fiscal 26, we begin the implementation process that would continue into fiscal 27. And obviously we have to look at it in the context of what happens with the joint owner negotiations as well. So these will be a stepped process, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. Councilor Travers.
Sorry, struggling to get to the mute button there. And apologies for not being there in person. I had a work meeting that ran longer than expected, and I thought this meeting would be over sooner. So apologies for that in advance. And also, I'm going to start with some apologies here, Darren. Sorry for not getting you these questions in advance. If you don't have answers this evening, happy for you to take them here and then get back to me later. I am anticipating that this year more so than in recent years, because everyone is sort of feeling the pinch of increased costs. More pushback on any rate increases. I know in large part this has been driving our and the mayor's collaborative effort to keep down any general fund tax increase or keep away any general fund tax increase and otherwise limit increases elsewhere. And so as we look towards a potential 4.5% rate increase, I'm wondering if you can speak to, well, first of all, I'm curious if you can speak to just how much is a 1% increase to your budget, just because I think it's a good math exercise for folks to understand. And then second, I'm curious if you're able to speak to, in coming to the conclusion of needing a 4.5% rate increase, are there any past initiatives that you've had to walk back on, or any other opportunities that you've foregone in order to keep that rate increase to where it is at 4.5%? And then I suppose my last question would be, has the department taken on any sort of exercise in terms of, if we wanted to keep that rate increase less than 4.5%, what kind of sacrifices would have to be made? Because I do think that for us, in going to the community and responding to potential pushback from our constituents on a potential rate increase, we're going to need to explain to them not just, we're all facing increased costs, but also, if we were to try to do something less than 4.5%, what that would mean in terms of the, level of service and initiatives that have come from your department in recent years. So loaded question, but I do think an important one as we consider the budget and the potential rate increase. And happy to take any answers you have now, or happy for you to think about it some and get back to me at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm happy to answer now. Let me take your first question over to Emily, because she'll give a more precise answer than I will on what a 1% equates to from a dollar standpoint.
It's roughly $500,000.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that context. I should also mention, I think to put it more in the kind of the context that we think about the general fund, we started this budget exercise with a gap as well, and we cut $4.5 million of potential spending that our team had initially proposed as being part of the budget through a multi-month exercise of going through cutting expenses, prioritizing initiatives. And so we feel, although we agree, nobody on our team enjoys bringing a rate case at any time, and we certainly want them to be low single digits in all cases that we can. We came to the conclusion that the 4.5% was appropriate after going through the exercise of cutting about $4.5 million out of the expenses and getting the Moody's metrics to the place where we needed them. And so if we were to reduce the rate request without some sort of offset, we would face a pretty significant challenge, I think, in maintaining our metrics for Moody's, which is not an outcome that I know anybody wants. The things we would look at and the things I don't want to cut that would, be on the table in that kind of scenario would be like our incentive programs. Do we cut back on the electrification incentives because we are doing more in that space than maybe what's legally required by the state? Would we cut back on certain other initiatives like that? And I think, there's certain pieces of our budget that unfortunately we can't control. Our power supply, our transmission costs, safety and reliability, our distribution system, those are all kind of locked in. And so unfortunately, when you sit down to do the budget exercise, your controllable piece, the piece you can kind of manipulate to get lower cost, is a much lower share of the budget overall than the total budget. So we feel like the 4.5%, while not desirable in any context, was appropriate. And we also, given that we're PUC regulated, it's our obligation to bring forward a reasonable rate case to the PUC when it's merited. Doesn't mean that we don't have some discretion over that. Clearly we do. But they get concerned, particularly for municipalities, if they don't ask for rate changes when they need them due to the kind of different model that an investor-owned utility has compared to a cooperative or municipal. There gets to be concern at the state level. So that was the balance of factors that we put in. And certainly our goal is to have an even lower rate change next year. We really want to be at the level of inflation, which I know right now we're kind of at that level, but we're hoping inflation continues to come down and that we can also bring down our rate changes to a very, very low single-digit level. I hope that's a helpful explanation.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Anything else, Councilor Travers?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from councilors? Councilor Broderick.
Thanks. So my first question is, so I know part of the reason that this rate increase has to happen is that between 2025 and 2026 budgets, you're not seeing as big of an increase in, I guess, revenue by usage as you may have expected. Do you believe that given the development happening in Burlington, you're going to see that go up to expectation or maybe beyond in 2027 and beyond?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And a few years ago, we were seeing the opposite. We were seeing flat to declining sales. So even seeing the 1.5% going up is a positive in of itself. It's not as positive as we would want. But yes, I think the combination of the electrification incentives and some of the development projects that are taking place, City Place, potential development, whether it's at the medical center or whether it's the South End Innovation District. All these different proposals are really important. You know, to put it in context, when we lost Blodgett Ovens, for example, that was a really significant load decrease for us. When we lost the current mall and the Macy's, that was a significant load decrease. And the system's built to serve a load really that was, you know, not there. And so you're maintaining a fixed cost at a level where you're not getting as much revenue from the sales. So getting the sales up in a positive way, because it either means we're having economic development and housing or because people are electrifying, is a good thing. We do see more of it over the next, 4 to 5 years, kind of reversing trend from the first part of this decade, where because of the pandemic and some of the other factors, we saw declines in sales. So, and that'll offset rate pressure to some extent in the future.
And that kind of leads into my second question / comment about your electrification initiatives. Yeah, I had assumed correctly that encouraging these electrification initiatives will actually, in the long run, bring more into to BED, as there will be more reasons to use, whether it's for electrification in general or especially heating, the heating sector.
That's right.
So I'm appreciative of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, it's good climate policy and it's good business policy for us as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, thanks, team. I appreciate it. And of course, Darren and his team are available for more questions as you digest all the information. These are two more of our more complicated departments, so certainly if other counselors are catching up later on, open invitation for more questions as we continue the budget process in the month of May. So with no other business, I will adjourn the Board of Finance at 7:15 p.m. Thank you all very much.